What's up, everybody? My name is Sonny Teray, and I am very happy to be with y'all this evening as we bring y'all part one of our series here at Fire This Time podcast. Our series is called White Money and Black Movements. So I'm going to get into a lot more of what we're doing with that. But to start things off, I got to welcome my co-hosts, Slank and Akita G. What up, y'all?
Hey. How y'all doing?
Yes, sir. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it off to Akita G so he can welcome y'all. And then we can get started. Let's get it.
Well, y'all know what it is, y'all. We back. Episode 113. We're trying to give y'all that heat, try to keep it going. But you know what you can do for us. You can always like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Let us know what you think and let us know some ideas we can throw out. And we'll try to get back to you with that. With that, I'm going to pass it back to my man, Arkeet.
So with that being said, y'all, what we have on the agenda today is, like I said, the first part of our series, White Money in Black Movements. And also how the Ford Foundation united with U.S. intelligence to destroy Black militancy. So with this series, we're going to be running through the history, a lot of contemporary analysis too. But, three big questions that we're going to be asking. Number one, how have large white philanthropic organizations influenced Black social movements? Number two, what effect has this influence had on the direction of the civil rights / Black Power era and now? And number three, what is the relationship between organizations like the Ford Foundation and federal intelligence agencies like the FBI, CIA, Army intelligence, etc.? So that's what we're going to be talking about a lot with this series. And we're going to get into more of the purpose why here in a second. But I want to kick things over as part of the introduction to my brother Slank, so he can kind of introduce Robert Allen and some of our framing on this issue. So go ahead, take it, Slank.
Yeah, so I think I got the book over here. Robert Allen, he wrote Black Awakening in Capitalist America. Just kind of analyzing conditions during the civil rights movement, a lot of what it was. And one of the things that he highlighted in that book was the influence of white philanthropic organizations like the Ford Foundation, putting money into Black organizations to try and steer their ideas and what they were doing and pushing to try to kind of control the direction of Black movements. So Robert Allen spent a lot of time in the book going into how during the 1960s, these white philanthropic organizations who are very tied to U.S. intelligence agencies like the CIA and the FBI were trying to tame the ghetto. That was the Ford Foundation's mission, basically. They didn't want these the rebellions that were happening in cities throughout America during the civil rights movement to continue because it was bad for business. They wanted to steer Black militancy away from that attacking the system, trying to overthrow the system into a more accommodationist, just trying to fit in with the system and stuff like that. One of the things they did, they found, the Ford Foundation specifically found that funding NAACP and the Urban League and stuff like that, these more liberal, mainstream Black organizations that had a lot of ties to white money and white organizations already, wasn't really helping them tame the ghetto. It wasn't calming down the rebellion. So they started to fund more militant Black organizations like CORE, giving them hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants, with the ultimate goal being to get these groups to steer Black youth away from being in the streets fighting for, self-determination and protesting, and more toward establishment like corporate Black capitalism initiatives, things like that. So that was one of the things that Ford was very involved in from the 60s, and it continues on through today.
Yes, sir. And I really like how Robert Allen ended this passage that you included here, Slank. He says, from the foundation's point of view, old style moderate leaders no longer exercise any real control, while genuine Black radicals were too dangerous. CORE, meaning the Congress of Racial Equality, fit the bill because its talk about Black revolution was believed to appeal to discontented Blacks, while its actual program of achieving Black power through massive injections of governmental business and foundation aid seemingly opened the way for continued corporate domination of Black communities by means of a new Black elite. So you're going to see how important these words and this framing of the issue is as we go through this history over, this multi-part series that we're taking on. So before we get, I say too much, let's actually focus a little bit more on the purpose of why we're taking on this subject in the way that we're doing it. So Aki, I'm going to pass it to you to kind of go over some of the purpose.
Well, like all things, you got to have a purpose that gives you some direction. So we got a purpose, and we're going to try to give ourselves some direction in this. So purpose number one, we want to expose the negative influence of white money on Black social movements throughout the 20th century. Where the cash coming from? Who putting the money up? How they getting it? That tell you what they own. Second purpose, analyze the history of the Ford Foundation. We're going to go through a little history today, y'all. We're going to talk a little facts, a little bit of a tracing of a lineage of a certain type of activity in our movements. Third purpose, we're going to examine the relationship between the Ford Foundation and the federal intelligence apparatus. In other words, the feds. Something we already know, but we're going to go into it and give a little more context to it. And the last purpose, to examine contemporary movement capture processes, meaning how does movements get a hold to the people, and what's behind that? I'll pass it back to you, Aki.
Yeah, so they kind of provide a definition of this of movement capture. Movement capture refers to the process by which state or institutional actors systematically co-opt, redirect, or neutralize radical movements through a combination of assimilation, like funding moderate alternatives, and discursive containment, like framing militancy as irrational or immoral. Of course, there's other ways to disrupt movements, like straight up repression, violent repression, locking people up. We're not going to be focusing in this series as much on that aspect, but more so, like we've kind of stated before, this relationship between the philanthropic organizations, which might fund a certain type of redirection of, like, for example, Black Power type of energy, right? How does the state work with these large philanthropic corporate organizations to redirect or assimilate or contain movements? So and also just to go back to the purpose real quick, this point 4, I know there's going to be a lot of people that watch the series that might have gotten here just because they saw some of the research that Slink and I put out on Twitter previously about Black Men Build being funded by the Ford Foundation. So we won't be covering that here in this first episode, but it will be covered in a future episode. And yeah, I mean that if you went through those threads or whatever when it came up, you saw a lot of the reasoning that we gave there. But we're going to elaborate a lot. So tune in, stay, get cozy a little bit, because we are on, a longer ride with this, so yeah, to keep it moving though, we also just want to say a quick word just about some of the context of this time period that we're going to be starting in for this first part of the series, right? So we're starting in the early 20th century. So during a time called the Nadir for our people, the tail end of it. Once we start looking at the rise of the FBI and these other groups. So I'm going to pass it off again to Aki so he can talk a little bit more about the context, the conditions our people were in at this time, because I think that's important context to consider. Go ahead, Aki.
Well, I'm back. And, the Nadir is an important part in our history. It follows the time period in our history called the Reconstruction. We know the Reconstruction was the period of time that came after 1865 when African Americans were freed from slavery. And that time period, we began to make many gains. This is the time of the Freedmen's Banks. This is the time of Freedmen's Schools, Freedmen's Bureau, things of that such nature. You've seen many black people going into the House of Representatives and even getting into offices in Congress, especially in places like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and South Carolina. But it was a lot of other things that came in the context of that time period. And that time period, we were also dealing with the federal government trying to get, or the state governments trying to get back control of their property. And pretty much 1877, we have a great betrayal by the federal government against the African American community here in the United States. Whereas when the Reconstruction was here, federal government was actually implemented militarily and had a presence in southern states and southern states that came out of slavery and things of that such nature. 1877, the Great Betrayal, what we call the Hayes-Tilden Act, which was a deal between Hayes and Tilden, two presidential candidates, which was to pretty much you give me the presidency, and I'll take those federal troops out the South. The deal was made, the federal troops was taken out of the South, and then we come to this point we call the nadir. And if anybody doesn't know, a nadir is a lowest part in a situation. It's the arc, or not the arc, but the descendant of a circle. So you're going to the lowest point, and this was a very bad time period for us here in the United States. This is the time when Jim Crow laws came about. This is the time when a lot of the civil rights that black people was gaining here in the United States, or we gained during Reconstruction, the right to vote, things of that such nature, were being snatched from us left and right by the states. The states were now implementing those systems to try to keep and suppress black people here in America. Also, things that were taking place was the sharecropping system was reinstituted, which was the new form of slavery. A lot of the slaves who got away from the plantations ended up having to go right back there to work for pennies. And this led to a lot of poverty, just led to a lot of conflicts, and also brewing ideas, that was going on with black people at that time. And then we come all the way up into the time period around the early 1900s, and this is when you start seeing black men and black women migrating up north. You see us coming up north. You see us going to work in factories, pretty much still doing slave labor, pretty much still doing slave work. Let alone from that, you have the massive amount of lynchings that was taking place in North America. You have the massive amount of injustices going on against black Americans here. We eventually get up to a time period around World War I, and this is sort of where this change and shift took place. This is also one of the ways how we started to come up north during this great nadir. We were escaping terrorism in the South. The Industrial Revolution was starting to kick full-fledged, and they sort of no longer needed people on farms. They needed us in factories and industrial plants, so they started moving us up. And this, when we started coming up north, and our family started coming from Alabama, Mississippi, South Carolina, and places like that, to move up north, to move into these places like Detroit, Chicago, New York, and other places like that, bringing a large population of black people up to these cities. But the problem didn't stop then, because Jim Crow still followed his way up north, and they were still getting issues. They were still being disenfranchised, discriminated against in jobs. Unions began to become corrupt. There was various different things going on in this nadir period. It's a period that's going to lead up to this, because this right here will show the background, the setting, the intentions of this system against us here in North America. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Aki.
No, I appreciate that breakdown, Aki. Definitely very helpful. Let's keep it moving though. And yeah, we're getting more into part one, foundations of U.S. intelligence's infiltration of black movements. So we're gonna start out and talk about the founding of the FBI, which of course is going to play an important part and the narrative that follows. So I'm gonna pass it to Slank. Yeah, Slank, what you got to say about the founding of the FBI?
Yeah, so it comes out of 1908 is when it was officially founded under a different name originally, but the proto FBI comes out of 1908. It was pretty much the brainchild of the Attorney General at the time, Charles Bonaparte, who's the grandnephew of Napoleon. People that know about the Haitian Revolution and stuff definitely know Napoleon was, not a good guy. So basically, his grandnephew was the Attorney General under Theodore Roosevelt, and they kind of formulated this FBI at first to go after certain federal crimes involving mail and things like that, but expanding over time as kind of part of this progressive reform era that kind of Teddy Roosevelt was leading. It wasn't progressive for black people, but progressive in quotes. And so that's kind of the foundation, was the brainchild of Teddy Roosevelt and Bonaparte, and it grew from there on. I think the first director was, let me see, Stanley W. Finch was who they picked to head it. And very quickly its focus became focusing on black militancy, especially once Hoover took charge of the radical division in 1919. That's when that kind of really jumped off. What we got here? Yeah, that's just going over some of the stuff. But yeah, that's kind of the early foundations of the FBI. And then let me see.
You want to get into the FBI's crusade against Jack Johnson?
Yeah, so 1910, July. Well, I think actually it was July 4th. I think that date might be wrong. It was 7/4/1910. Jack Johnson was a black boxer, heavyweight. He beat Jim Jeffries for the championship. Jim Jeffries is seen as the Great White Hope. It was in Reno. As you can see, a lot of people was out there. A lot of white folks was not happy about this because, being the heavyweight champion was kind of the symbol of manhood, and they saw it as like a white champion obviously needs to be a white champion because white supremacy and all that shit. So Jim Jeffries getting his ass kicked was not a good look for the white supremacy movement at the time. So this sparked race riots in over 30 cities throughout the U.S. with white mobs attacking black people, killing scores of black people. And this is in 1910, a few years after the FBI's founding. And one of the first crusades that the FBI kind of did to kind of jumpstart the career of the FBI. And again, I think it was called the Bureau of Investigation or something different originally. It didn't get that name FBI until a little bit later, but it was the same thing. And one of their first crusades was to go after Jack Johnson. They didn't like that he beat this white boy, won the championship. And Jack Johnson also was known to date white women. So they really didn't like that, him seeing in magazines and pictures, in his fancy cars with white women. They couldn't take that. So they used the Mann Act, which was the White Slave Trade Act, basically saying that he was transporting women across state lines for like sexual purposes or something. And they found some loophole basically to go after Jack Johnson. So that was one of the FBI's early crusades, was, attacking the symbol of black manhood, black militancy in the form of this boxer. And that kind of just laid the foundation for what the FBI would be on for the continuation of its history, definitely through the Hoover years up through the 70s.
Better. Anything you want to add here, Aki? I know you're a boxing fan yourself. You know what I'm saying? Anything you want to add about Jack Johnson, Aki? You muted.
Apologize. If you don't know who Jack Johnson is, you need to do some research on Jack. The original King Kong. It's crazy that the FBI started from trying to keep a black man from dating white women and taking them across state lines. I mean, that was really a crime back then. That was really a crime back then. But it also show you how petty their asses is. So, I ain't too much more I can add to that. He did enough on that one. Just do your research on Jack Johnson.
Yes, sir. All right, to keep it moving, we're gonna jump around just a little bit and talk a little bit about military intelligence. So the Military Intelligence Division started in 1917. In an article from a former, I think somebody in naval intelligence, they published a series of articles in the Commercial Appeal newspaper out of Memphis, Tennessee. One of them being this one from '93, where he talks about the Military Intelligence Division and how, as you see here, the spy system that would question the loyalties of Black Americans for generations began May 3rd, 1917. That day, Secretary of War Newton D. Baker, pictured on the right, ordered Van Diemen or demand to crank up the department's sleepy Military Intelligence Division, MID. In a June 2nd, 1917 memo to Baker, he said the United States faced four principal enemies. Number one, the international workers of the world. Number two, opponents of the draft. Number two. Number three, socialists. And number four, being Negro unrest. So Negro unrest domestically here within the states was on the United States military's radar, to the point where they were committing, their intelligence division to look into it. Not something that we want to discount. Moving on from here on the right, you see a quote from the same article where it says, at first, the Army used a reporting network of private citizens that included church members, Black businessmen, such as Memphis's Robert R. Church Jr., and it goes on to state others, but I included a picture of Robert R. Church Jr. below there. But just to go, this is just to show you how the Army, before the FBI, which was at this time maybe still the Bureau of Investigations, before that really matured into the organizational entity, the bureaucracy that it eventually would become, especially under Hoover. More of the domestic intelligence work for the U.S. was done by the Army, and we see there that even then they were very apt to use church members. So they got the mothers of the church, Aki, out here telling on folks.
That's the modern snitch system right now. That let me know what they did, what they doing now. They've been back in the day doing shit like that. That's wild.
Yeah,
but it's real.
So, and you can think about some of the Black nationalist churches back then. Some of the early Black nationalists were those that were heavily involved in the church, or in the AME church, for instance. So here on the left, though, we have Emmett J. Scott, another possible early Black collaborator, a likely one, right? I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but Emmett J. Scott, his background was with the Tuskegee Institute and working under Booker T. Washington. Is that right?
He was his confidential secretary.
There you go. That's what I was looking for. The confidential secretary for Booker T. Washington, who then would later become special advisor of Black affairs to the Secretary of War under Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, who, you asked? Oh, the president that showed Birth of a Nation in the White House, that said it was like history written with lightning. Oh, you don't know the film Birth of a Nation? The one where white people was putting on blackface, and that really began these tropes and stereotypes of Black men savagely pursuing white women. Something that maybe the Ford Foundation would have a hand in remixing during Black feminism's rise, and the CIA and Steinem. We'll get to all that. But
Margaret Sanger and all that.
But yeah, I mean, crazy shit. I don't have much to say about Emmett J. Scott, but those connections are important. I don't have any like concrete history of any fuck shit that he did. But Slang, do you have something you want to
say? No, I will say that he is the grandfather. This kind of like relevant, I would say, of Elaine Brown, the Black Panther leader, who also has rumors herself of being involved with U.S. intelligence due to her dating a CIA agent named J. Kennedy the whole time she was in the Black Panther Party. So, yeah, old white man. Yeah, he was a civil rights spy. That was a specialty. That was Elaine Brown's boyfriend during her time as a Black radical leader. So that this was her grandfather, another, special advisor to the, basically.
And then Slant, stay on the mic for a second. So this is actually him. He's a Negro member of the Liberian Commission. So let's just, can you maybe tell the audience a little bit more about Liberia as a Western-led mission, to colonize Africa with, the help of Black elite?
Yeah. So I just know that it was founded by, U.S. Politicians and stuff. I believe the capital is Monrovia, which is named after James Monroe. Their flag was like the American flag. It was founded as a place to send Black Americans to get them out of the U.S. because they didn't want the presence of free Negroes in the U.S. That was setting a bad example for the enslaved Black people. And I don't know too deep about the history, but I know that's kind of like a lot of that early history is tied to like the American Colonization Society, which was a white organization trying to send, Black people back to Africa, not on a Marcus Garvey tip, but more on a, Abraham Lincoln type. We got to send these niggas somewhere else.
I got you. Aki, you got something?
I was going to say, it shouldn't be confused with the African Colonization Society. It was two organizations. And it's funny that these organizations had a conversation back in the 1800s, like a conversation we've been seeing recently concerning Black people and should we identify with our African heritage or an identity. And the decision at that time was they were going to go with the term Negro. But what they also came out of that conversation, and you can find these in the Negro conventions of Philadelphia and New York. What came out of it is that they knew that the American Colonization Society was on some fuck shit. And what they pretty much said was that they're trying to send specifically free Blacks with wealth back to Africa to take our land, our businesses, and our properties, and to keep our relatives and family members still enslaved in the South. And they made a decision at that time to stay here and fight for their ancestors. And in turn, they created the African Colonization Society, which was built and ran by us. And then we began to send people over to Liberia too. I just wanted to make that note because a lot of people get them confused.
I appreciate that, Aki. We're going to keep it moving on the presentation just for time's sake. So Slank, I'll pass it to you. You want to introduce the book that we're reading from a little bit more, and go ahead, Slank.
Yeah, so like a lot of the passages I've been quoting from and stuff are from this book, FBI Eyes, How J. Edgar Hoover's Ghost Readers Framed African American Literature by William J. Maxwell. It's probably from the early 2010s. I'm not sure the exact year, but basically a big theme of this book, it starts out analyzing one of the famous letters that Dr. Martin Luther King received, telling him basically to kill himself because they had dirt on him or something like that. That letter was written from the perspective of a Black person, a church-going, Black Christian who was writing Dr. King under the premise of you're making our movement look bad because you're having these relations or whatever they were making up, kind of dirt they had on him. But the actual writer of this letter was not a Black church goer. It was a FBI agent named William Sullivan. And so the book kind of starts out with that, showing that the FBI by the 60s was very adept at writing these blackface letters, basically, to Black leaders, trying to get them to doubt themselves, to, in this case, trying to get Martin Luther King to kill himself. And it was like an ongoing theme of the FBI under Hoover was this infiltration of Black movements through not only like this literary he called it lit cop federalism, basically like literary policing. Basically, they're reading all the black articles that come out. You know, they're reading all the black literature, all the black plays, music, trying to see any signs of black militancy, and then they're trying to infiltrate those spaces, write as members of those spaces, and just redirect the whole tone of the movement. And this really started out in 1919 during the Red Summer, which during this time there was a lot of white violence against black neighborhoods, black communities in cities throughout America. And the FBI looked at it not as, oh, white mobs are killing black people, but no, Negroes are a little too militant. Sometimes they're fighting back a little too much. So we need to really look into their literature, look into their movements. And some people in the FBI, like Special Agent Robert Agger Bowen, J. Edgar Hoover himself, and Major Arthur Love of Army Intelligence, they kind of together wrote this book called Radicalism and Sedition Among Negroes, as reflected in their publications. And its major focus was looking at, you know, poems of Claude McKay and the emerging Harlem Renaissance works, and trying to find Bolshevik influences, and basically seeing black militancy as a threat just on par with, you know, communism and all these other things that the U.S. intelligence agencies were so, you know, obsessed over, things like that. So, yeah, basically, it just kind of laid the foundation. This Radicalism and Sedition book was kind of that early, showed that early emphasis by the FBI that they had a special project to monitor the Negro press. And they weren't doing this for, you know, any other racial groups' literature. They weren't, you know, monitoring the Latino press in 1919 or anything like the way they were with this. So
you're really hitting on some important stuff, Aki. Slang, I should say. That might confuse some of our listeners if I call everybody Aki. But yeah, you're right on point though, Slang. I mean, yeah, it's unique in the sense that, I mean, this is only being applied towards Black Americans largely. It's also unique just in the sense that, I mean, these aren't maybe tactics or behaviors that one would typically associate with, you know, U.S. intelligence. You know, maybe we think about U.S. intelligence too often through the lens of like the FBI, which, you know, or COINTELPRO with it. So with that being said, I'm gonna pass it back to you, Slank. Kind of dig into what FBI's the book FBI's is talking about as far as the rivalry between the FBI and CIA, how they differed in approach. Yeah.
And that was a good point too, because like most people probably think of secret agents as like James Bond, you know, action, but there was the FBI had a whole translations bureau where they just sat in rooms and read black work all day, you know, wrote book reviews, made blackface ghost write letters, and, you know, shit like that. Like there's people behind typewriters too that was just doing just as nefarious shit in a different way, basically. But yeah, so like,
I mean, because I mean, when you think about COINTELPRO, I know, like, before I encountered this book and we really dug into this history together, of course I knew they wrote some fake letters between Panther members, but just the idea that the FBI is so highly invested into Black literature, where they are, you know, some of the most prominent readers, critics, you know what I'm saying, like some of the critics, the public critics of these works, you know what I'm saying, are actually underwritten, ghostwritten by the FBI. You know what I'm saying? Like and I mean, so much that they understand how important our discourse and our intellectual evolution is, to the point where they're willing to control it by any means. You know what I'm saying? Like we got to take out the militancy, even if it appears in literature. Fuck if it appears in a political program where people's in the streets with it. If it even appears in literature, we coming after it.
yeah,
That's how, you know, threatening we are.
It's a reason why they didn't want slaves to learn how to read and write. But once we did get that opportunity, if you go into our literature, it's giving you a piece to be able to crack the code. we put a lot of stuff in our culture, and it gives the ability for them to crack the code. You know, um, think about it with the FBI police. I mean, hip hop police. When they existed. Think about it even now in probably the last 15, 20 years, they've been using lyrics and songs to solve cases. I mean, we think about situations with certain people that's behind the in the judicial system who when you go into the feds or the state penitentiary, they read every single letter. They try to crack codes because it's natural for people to try to have some form of communication to themselves. So it wouldn't be a surprise to me that they sit back there just reading letters, reading magazine articles, looking up anything that they can find, um, because they need a way to be able to translate what we do.
Facts. No, that's a good point. They definitely read. Yeah, that's one of the motivations behind why they didn't want us reading and writing in the slavery times, is because they knew that was a form of communication where we could get together and form revolt, shit like that. So yeah, and this my bad.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna pull open the book. Was it page 134 you wanted me to open for FBI's?
I think 132 and 33 is where it kind of gets into it, but it's talking about this difference between the FBI and the CIA. One of the early things it mentions is that Hoover, it's right there. Hoover himself, in fact, helped delay the establishment of the U.S. Central Intelligence Unit until the 1947 passage of President Harry Truman's National Security Act. So Hoover kind of didn't want a competing organization. He wanted to be the head of intelligence, you know what I'm saying, both domestic, foreign, whatever. And when he saw kind of the OSS, which was the basically the CIA before it was the CIA, was called the Office of Strategic Services, Office of Strategic Services, OSS. So like Hoover didn't want this becoming a permanent non-wartime only organization, basically. And he helped delay the passage, lobbying against it and things like that. But eventually it did become an organization on its own and kind of took the role of more of the foreign intelligence, while the FBI was seen as more of the domestic intelligence monitor. And one of the CIA and the FBI, even after they were founded, kind of still had some of this rivalry, whereas the CIA was seen more as WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, Ivy League educated people from Yale that had English degrees from Yale and shit like that, whereas the FBI, the CIA put them down as being Fordham Bronx Irish is what they said it stood for, meaning that these are men from Irish Catholics from the Bronx, a little lower class than the CIA. They're more upper crust or whatever there. And so there was this kind of like class, kind of like one thing, and they're more intelligent than the other. But even with the CIA having that more Ivy League English department background and having a whole lot of operatives who were multilingual, I think it was around 20-30% of the CIA in the early days spoke different languages. The FBI also was very focused on this literary spying, as we've been pointing out. So basically just showing that it wasn't all CIA and FBI working together on this, happy to work together and stuff. There was a lot of them trying to show each other up, be the superior intelligence agency. Here you got a picture of Hoover with his secretary and his lover, Clyde Tolson, because Hoover also, he had a boyfriend that worked in the FBI, and but Hoover was also very anti-gay. He would go after, for instance, Claude McKay. He didn't like his writing, not only because it was, poems like "If We Must Die" have that black militant theme, but also because Claude McKay was gay, and Hoover was like obsessed with going after him for that, kind of trying to repress his own, gayness or whatever. So but that's basically it on that.
Man, some crazy history. And again, we're going to keep tracking this history. I mean, because we haven't even touched on what the FBI, CIA, what were they doing in the 50s leading up to the civil rights movement, or even during the civil rights and black power movements. So yeah, but we're getting there, y'all. But before we get there, we got to still finish up this episode on this early period, including looking at Marcus Garvey, prominent, if not the most prominent black nationalist leader of all time here in the Americas, I'll say. The FBI investigation against him and the United Negro Improvement Association began in 1919. This is running almost pretty much simultaneous, parallel to him being targeted by other black leaders of the time, including A. Philip Randolph, the NAACP, including their field secretary William Pickens, but also one of their founders, W.E.B. Du Bois, was very anti-Garvey for a significant period of time. Now, I'm not exactly alleging a relationship between the two, but I will say that they're part of this history is A. Philip Randolph. I believe Du Bois is part of this group, but a group of prominent black American leaders, they went to the Attorney General of the United States and with a petition supporting the deportation and the charges levied against Garvey. So and that's all part of this Garvey must go campaign. So I mean, all that to say, there is somewhat a relationship there between the NAACP, something largely funded by white philanthropists, including I think the Garland Foundation. I think is the name of one of the largest grantees or grantors back then for the NAACP. But yeah, you see this. If they're not united in practice, they're united in opinion, and also you see people like A. Philip Randolph, even people like Cyril Briggs from the African Blood Brotherhood, also supporting these calls to deport Marcus Garvey and also charge him and lock him in U.S. prisons. I think there's different ways to take this part of the history. I think it's a stain on a lot of those folks' legacies. But there's another flyer actually I could have included here that talked about Marcus Garvey meeting with Klan leaders, and we can kind of get into that if we want. I don't know if this is like the place where we want to weigh that part of the history. But before we move on, I'll just have people look at this flyer. And just to show you how serious the campaign against Marcus Garvey was, just read some of this flyer. It says Marcus Garvey must go, and it says 4 of the greatest Negro meetings ever held in New York will be on this string of Sundays. I mean,
That's wild.
that's showing you how well funded this campaign was. You know what I'm saying? How important these black leaders saw it, they saw it as this important. They had to plan some of what they at least advertised as some of the greatest meetings ever. You know what I'm saying? 2 of them being led by one, the field secretary of the NAACP, and the third one by the director of branches for the NAACP. By the way, this is the same NAACP that would oppose Robert F. Williams and kick him out later, and would participate in the Red Scare even before that. So yeah, but I'll pass it off to the Slank and Aki if y'all want to add anything here just on this. Marcus Garvey being targeted by both the intelligence apparatus as well as other black leaders.
I'm just tripping off of, they have these dates and then, they have subjects that they're going to talk about. So I would emphasize, some of the people read some of these subjects. It just said like Professor William, who was that? Pick what to do when Negro leaders league with, I'm sure if I can see that, Negro lynchers.
Yeah.
The only way to redeem Africa. The madness of Marcus Garvey. Like they really own that.
Yeah, I think they're really trying to. It seems like they're trying to misconstrue a lot of what Garvey was about. But again, I don't want to get into Garvey meeting with the Klan and why he might have done that. I think that might that might kind of derail us a little bit. But that is
Yeah.
an important topic for us as Black nationalists to talk about. You know what I'm saying? And but it also just reminds us, something we mentioned before. The CIA, FBI, the intelligence apparatus, they do have it within them to unite with communists to pursue their interests against militant nationalists. You know what I'm saying? They will unite with socialists to do that. And I'm not saying they can't go the other way around too, but yeah, we can keep it going. Slang, you got anything on here?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that some of these like communists or socialists they were uniting with were people who weren't like A. Philip Randolph technically started as a socialist or a communist, but he was one of these people like Bayard Rustin that slowly moved rightward to by the point of the 1970s, he's supporting Israel and, going soft on Rhodesia and shit like that. So it was more of these already opportunistic uh, Black leftists, I guess, who would move from party to party, slowly going rightward, you know what I'm saying, that would be more prone to linking with the feds, because A. Philip Randolph definitely has a lot of federal connections with CIA connected labor unions and shit later on. So he might have started as a radical or whatever in the early 1900s, but obviously by 1919 he's already aligning with that side of it, basically.
And really, A. Philip Randolph, he started as the organizer for the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters.
Yeah, that union for the Black train work. Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not sure how connected they were to socialists back then. And they very well could have been, but that was just one of the first unions for Black workers. You know what I'm saying? And it became like a stepping stone for other things. And I could kind of see maybe through that avenue, him getting closer with white leftists, white radicals, which are much more apt to work with the state. You know what I'm saying? We know about, or we will be talking about in future episodes, I'll say,
the DSA and stuff like that.
Yeah, the connections between the US Communist Party or Communist Party USA, I forget which one, and the Democratic Socialists of America, and and their connection with the intelligence apparatus. And we'll talk about in a future episode a story of the founder of DSA and Bayard Rustin going overseas someplace to do some counterinsurgent shit. So yeah, I mean there's a lot coming in this series as y'all see soon. But yeah, I mean the feds will put these motherfuckers together. You're like, hey, y'all motherfuckers go play over there, go fulfill this. You know what I'm saying? We'll make sure that y'all got what y'all need in terms of funding. But yeah, anyways, let's keep it moving. This next slide, as we look to round out this episode, we're actually gonna watch this piece. We're gonna this episode, but especially next episode, we're gonna be talking about the Ford Foundation in its early years. For now, we'll just mention that it was founded in 1936 by the wealth of the Ford family. Not really that important to track, the fact that the first presidents were tied, like the sons and grandsons of the family. It gets more important to look at that as we get to like the 50s, where was it Coley? Was that the Mark Coley? Was that his name?
McCloy is one. John McCloy, basically influential guy that kind of led the founding of the OSS, which became the CIA. Was in charge of Japanese internment during the Second World War. Was in charge of he was the guy that pardoned a lot of the Nazi war criminals in the Nuremberg or whatever the trials were after the war. So he did all this crazy moves, but he was also head of the Chase Bank, head of the Ford Foundation in the 50s and early 60s, So they got a lot of these people that move in between being the head of the CIA, then being the head of a big bank. Now they're the head of the Ford Foundation. It's like a revolving door where the politics, the money, and the military intelligence apparatus all just have the same characters.
Bad. So I'll let that be the preview for the next episode. We're going to be talking about McCloy and then McGeorge Bundy, who is the Ford Foundation president in the 60s, during the pivotal time period of, our most important movements, right? So it's important we look at what Bundy is doing. and what the Ford Foundation, how did they react to Black Power? You know what I'm saying? Because they actually provided one of the most important reactions for, you know, liberal society. So, but you know, we'll get into all that. But I just want to focus here for a second, and this is a short video that kind of explores some of this framing that we've been talking about as for this relationship between the Ford Foundation and the CIA. So let's check it out. Y'all can hear that okay?
The cultural flat feet of the FBI were on the warpath. It was becoming difficult for the American government openly to support abstract expressionist painters with a left-wing past. The FBI and the political right wing saw these painters and their work as subversive, even treasonous. The solution was to go covert, not a difficult reflex for the CIA.
Well, of course, one feature of doing it covertly is that the administration, the executive branch, could make the decision and do it. I mean, and it makes it a lot easier than the kind of debate that would occur with the Congress and every opinion element in the country on everything, including some of the very retrograde people who say, no, you can't support those kinds of people. They're terrible. They're softies. They're soft on communism and all the rest of it.
So what America got was the formation of an unofficial hidden arts council, a consortium which consisted of the cultural elite, the museum directors, the philanthropists, the urbane millionaires, the entrepreneurs, the critics, magazine editors, and CIA personnel. Exclusive clubs and bars were where members of the consortium did business. One of the network's leading lights was John McCloy, a former OSS agent and one of the architects of the CIA. He later had a key position on the Ford Foundation, a hugely rich charitable trust.
At the same time, McCloy is chairman of the Ford Foundation, and according to records...
I just want to pause it right here for a second so we don't get flagged or nothing like that. But yeah, Slank, guy you just mentioned, I forgot that he was part of this video.
Yeah, no, that's the guy. And like I said, he was involved with Chase Manhattan Bank, Council on Foreign Relations, pardoning all the Nazis. Like this is, and then heading Ford Foundation that just so happens to be giving money to Black radical organizations. So if you're getting your Black radical funding from John McCloy, who started the CIA and put Japanese people in the fucking concentration camps, it's probably not the most radical activities your organization is going to be getting into, basically.
Let's talk about it.
Found in the Ford Foundation's own archives, you can see that early in the 50s, the foundation was approached repeatedly by the CIA to help them provide cover for operations that they wanted to fund overseas.
But existing foundations like Ford had their limitations. They were bureaucratic, and officially at least, entirely independent of the CIA. Over large dinners and ice-cold martinis, the agency's old-school ties met to discuss more flexible ways of funding. Why not create new foundations if the existing ones were a pain?
We would go to somebody in New York who was a well-known rich person, and we would say, we want to set up a foundation, and we would tell him what we were trying to do and pledge him to secrecy, and he would say, of course, I'll do it. And then you would publish a letterhead, and his name would be on it, and it would be the foundation. It was really a pretty simple device.
In this way, the CIA set up a huge network of phony foundations. One, for instance, was the Farfield.
The Farfield Foundation was a CIA foundation, and there were many such. And we used we used the names of foundations for many purposes, but the foundation didn't exist except on paper.
So there you have, former CIA officials telling you what they did. And I would just assert at this stage, that what we're claiming is with this series, the Ford Foundation was the most important front organization, possibly remains the most important philanthropic front organization for the CIA. especially considering these important ties. And it's not talked about enough, because right now today we have groups like Black Men Build who represent themselves, who do present themselves as Black radicals, who do join the stage at the Black radical organizing conferences, national conferences, right? And they're being funded by these groups, and there needs to be some type of accounting for not enough awareness for what that money comes with and what it really means. So of course we're going to be getting into all that more. So I didn't mean to do that. Next slide. So as we look to wrap up, what you can look forward to in this series, this is not like an episode breakdown, but just as far as topics loosely that we'll be covering, Ford Foundation during the Cold War, McGeorge Bundy, urban rebellions, and the reaction by like liberal society, or the reaction by conservative white society to urban rebellions, right? Also Black militancy and counterinsurgency during the Black Power era, and also Black Men Build, the Working Families Party, and the Ford Foundation.
Yeah.
So that's the part of that trifecta that's operating right now. And what better way to infiltrate, at a time when, people are now tired of Black Lives Matter. They had to throw away the Black Lives Matter, front somewhat, because it stopped affecting the people, it stopped moving the people. Now they're trying to head off where we need to really go to, and that's kind of, resurrecting, some type of version of Black militant manhood, militant Black manhood that was around with Robert F. Williams and Malcolm X and the others. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's anything new. We just need to assert it again, and we're being headed off by these movement capture processes as represented by Black Men Build, right? Where they just want us to they want to capture all of that type of Black militant discourse within a Ford Foundation funded arena where we can just spin our tires and not go no place. Right? Yeah.
And one of the points that CIA guy at the end of that video made too, which is still relevant today, is that the setting up of the fake foundations kind of to make it harder to trace the money coming from the CIA to these organizations. That's something that still goes on today. And a lot of what we're going to get into when we talk about these modern organizations that are taking Ford money is how the Ford Foundation will give $1 million to some random foundation that gives it to another foundation. And then the money ends up getting to the radical organization. So it might not look on paper sometimes like it came directly from point A to point B. It goes through all this convoluted network, which is an attempt to obfuscate and distract and make it look harder to trace, basically.
So now we have this fake Black elite class, right, who say they represent the people they led and built movements when they've been handed platforms by white philanthropists, and they never had to lead a movement.
Yeah,
that's what we got. So yeah,
they would put that to intellectualize the movement. So as they tried to take the movement more from grassroots to more higher education. A lot of the indoctrination a lot of times took place in the higher academies. And then that transformed the movement, or added to the transforming of the movement. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, they create these organizations, and only these people that these upper elites sort of get access to that type of stuff anyway. So obviously from what we just been discussing, you had Black elites back in Garvey's time doing damage, laying seeds of chaos. Yeah. It's wild.
Right. So with that being said, y'all, we're gonna sign off. We're gonna make it less than an hour for this first part of the series. We appreciate y'all checking up with us, and see y'all next episode.
Peace.
Peace.